Hey, this is the Xbox Dadcast. Welcome, episode 10. This is a lot. We haven't done a show in a bit, so we have a lot to cover in this week's show. We will talk about Halo Infinite delayed, a November release date confirmed for the Series X. The Series S probably confirmed, and the xCloud beta and some issues with the Fruit company. This is a podcast about the Xbox and the upcoming Xbox Series X from the eyes of a casual gaming dad and lifelong gamer. I am Bon Diesel. I am an Xbox fanboy, PC casual, the Division 2 podcaster, husband to a lovely wife, and father to an adorably recently 1-year-old daughter. If you can, please rate this podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it on and share it with any friends on Twitter or other socials that I am too old to understand or care about. This month, I want to thank our Patreon supporters, Hassan, Christian, Darren, Tim, and PK. If you would like to support this podcast and my other content, please check out patreon.com/bondiesel. I am willing to do any type of promotional stuff, to do some merch, to do things like that for new and existing patrons. So if you have any ideas or requests, please let me know. Okay, so the headlining story here, Halo Infinite delayed. 343 announced that Infinite will be delayed to sometime in 2021 due to various delays, including COVID-19. So since this happened, and even since I added this to the show notes, there's been a lot going on. There's been different interviews and things like that. It seems like, we're hitting that part of the games coming out now are games that were probably basically done before all of the lockdowns and the COVID-19 situation really escalated. And what I think people need to realize is that probably starting this month or next month and moving forward, I'm expecting at some point there to be a pretty good 9 to 12 month drought of games getting delayed and not released, because I just don't think people realize how just because these devs can work on these games from home doesn't mean they can be nearly as productive. It doesn't mean they can be nearly as efficient, and just the communication is jacked up. I'm assuming most of these companies have their devs doing remote work, which probably means that they're doing remote logins to their work PCs. And that simply just isn't as fast. I have to do it even myself for my work, and it sucks. It's not fun. And I'm not doing high quality graphical design and world building and stuff like that. I'm literally just doing spreadsheets. So, I think this is probably the start of many things to come. I don't think this will be the last high profile delay. I've even seen people say that they wouldn't be surprised if PlayStation now delays or pushes back things like the Spider-Man standalone DLC thing that they're doing with Miles Morales, maybe even Horizon Zero Dawn. It's uncharted territory. So we'll have to wait and see how that's going to play out. I'm definitely bummed, but I haven't really been a big Halo fan since Halo 3. So, we'll talk more about how I think this impacts the Xbox Series X release and Microsoft in general in another section after the mid-roll. But I just, I think now we went from the next gen not, having basically one big amazing game that was going to drop this year to none. And so it's going to turn into maybe some change of motivations. But Xbox probably kind of needed that edge. But we'll talk more about that. The other interesting news that they very conveniently dropped the same day was confirming a November release date for the Series X. So in a blog, they basically said, hey, Series X coming to you in November. There's going to be 4,000 current and old gen games that will be able to be played on the system. Yes, and they kind of tried to brag about like the Medium and Scorn and some other kind of like lower tier exclusives that will be out. Tetris Effect, I think, was one of them. Yeah, no one's excited about that stuff. Let's be honest. The Medium looks kind of cool, but I don't really like horror games. Scorn just looks like it's a bunch of slimy penis monsters. I'm good, even though I know some people will like that stuff. Tetris, is Tetris. I know for me, the big thing I'm excited about is just simply being able to play all my current games at much higher fidelity. I still play a lot of games like the Division 2 and some other State of Decay and things like that. And those games, even though they were designed for the Xbox One gen, and I even have an Xbox One X, which in theory is the best one, those games still chug sometimes, especially Division. I'm excited to play at much rock solid FPS, frames per second, and just seeing animations be smoother. One thing I don't think people realize is that even on current games, even like Call of Duty and stuff like that, if you have a decent PC and you plug an Xbox controller in and play, it just feels better. The higher frames really do make the controlling feel better and things like that. So I think I think that there's a lot to be excited about. I think it's kind of typical for the last couple generations to not really have like a killer app on release, and to kind of focus on what's coming in the year or two after, which I think for Xbox is still pretty positive, and I think people should be pretty excited. The big thing is I think that we're going to be kind of waiting for the end of this month for August 27th when Gamescom happens. They're doing an online event this year, and I've seen a lot of kind of milling about and speculation that there's expected to be fairly big Xbox and PlayStation reveals at this time. And speaking of Xbox reveals, the third story we have here this week is talking a bit about the Series X, confirming basically the Series S, or the Xbox confirming the Series S, by accidentally sending out next generation Xbox controllers to a bunch of retailers, and I believe even some customers being able to buy them. This is the new controller that has the share button on it, and has some other small changes like to the D-pad and things like that. And on the packaging, it lists all the things it's compatible with: the Xbox One, PC, and the Xbox Series X and S. So this all but basically 100% confirms, which has been kind of the worst kept secret on earth, that there's a Series S of some type. It's still rumors to what that really means, like how much less powerful it might be and how much cheaper it might be, because we don't even know the price of the Series X yet. But we will probably find out soon. Again, I think this is something that's going to come at Gamescom. I think they're going to drop more information about the Series X, the price of the Series X. I think they're going to confirm the Series S and give the price for that as well, and probably open up pre-orders. I feel like if the systems are coming out in November, starting to take pre-orders in early September makes sense, or late August. So we will have to see about that. The other big news that happened that was super fun to follow was the xCloud beta coming out into somewhat full release, and some issues coming along with it. So on August 11th, a beta on Android release for xCloud, with the full release of xCloud on September 15th, initially with 100 games available. The future plans are still to make your entire library available, but a big issue that people came about was that they specifically stated that Android would have a beta, and that the iPhones and iPhone OS was not noted. And in fact, we're finding that xCloud simply won't be allowed to be on the Apple Store, because essentially Apple's saying that they would need to approve every single individual game. And there's a pretty, I would say probably pretty fair rumor that the monetization of it, Apple doesn't feel like they're getting enough of their cut, because they won't be able to charge for each individual game since it's a subscription service, despite the fact that they allow things like Netflix and stuff to exist on their OS. So that was a big hubbub. And what's really interesting is that since then, there's essentially a battle going on between Epic, Apple, Google, probably Amazon. I don't know. Everyone, all of these big giant tech companies are basically all battling it out right now. Epic decided to put an alternative way to pay for things in their mobile apps, so that skips any kind of revenue for Android or for the iPhone. And so both of those platforms removed Fortnite from their stores, which is a big deal if you don't realize how big Fortnite still is. And it seems like this initial kind of drama over the xCloud situation with Apple has really just exploded and kind of spiraled into some craziness. And I don't expect that to be resolved anytime soon. This is one of those weird situations where there's a bunch of these kind of evil, faceless, giant corporations all attacking each other. And I feel like the average person is just kind of sitting back and being like, I don't really know if I'm rooting for any of you. At least that's how I feel about it. So, we'll have to see how that plays out. I am definitely curious, but not super hopeful. At the end of the day, I suspect just currently rich people will probably just end up richer, and that's how those things tend to go. Okay, we're going to hit a quick mid-roll ad and then hit some speculation and opinion topics, and then we will wrap this fairly short episode up. Okay, so how bad is the delay of Halo for Microsoft? So there's been so much doom and gloom. It's been really interesting for me to watch, because after the reveal of Halo Infinite, there was just, the Craig memes and all this stuff. The console wars are just as hot as they've ever been, which we'll talk about in a moment. I think this is bad for the Xbox from like an optics moment. Forever it's going to be, the people who already don't like Xbox have already latched onto this moment as the Kinect of the Xbox Series X, the big mistake that they made. So the simple fact is that the PlayStation 5 is going to outsell the Series X. I think that should be something that is just assumed at this point. It's because of the way the two companies are looking at this next gen. PlayStation and Sony have a very old school way of looking at this business, and that's seen in some of the decisions they've made, such as having not really caring about cross-platform or cross-generation anymore. That basically PlayStation 5 is coming out, and that's the new system. That's what all the games are coming for. PlayStation 4 owners, your time is done. And it makes sense from a financial standpoint. They sold over 100 million consoles. They've made an epic crap ton of money. I've seen before people say that like, oh, Sony, PlayStation is just like a side project for them. It's not. The last time I did some research into it, it appeared that PlayStation for Sony makes up 30 or 35% of the revenue. So, and I think that fact and that how that contrasts to Microsoft with the Xbox shows why, PlayStation 5 is moving to, they believe in generations, and old controllers won't work on new games just because you're gonna have to buy the new stuff for the new thing because that's the way it is. Because they're still, because they're ahead, because they won, quote unquote, won this generation. The ball's in their court and they can do whatever they want. And what they want to do is make a crap ton of money. And that's probably what they're going to do again. Ethics or morals be damned, depending on how you look at it. Where on the other side with Microsoft, Xbox really is just kind of a pet project. Microsoft really, I believe, sees Xbox as a way to get their name out there, to get more people on their general platform. But if Xbox fails, Microsoft is fine. That company everyone thinks that Microsoft is so based off their OS, which they kind of are, I guess, maybe. But their biggest thing actually nowadays is data hosting and data, having servers and selling servers. I believe their platform is the Azure platform, which a lot of companies and governments use for lots of things. So, and I believe Microsoft could buy Sony like 10 times over or something like that. It's just a much larger company. So it's really interesting where you almost have this situation where it's almost like comparing like the Chevy Volt to the new Tesla. The Tesla, is the hot thing, but Tesla really depends on that individual product to stay alive. They need it. Where if the Chevy Volt, it's pretty good, but the Chevy isn't gonna live or die by that one thing. So for me, it's always been, it's hard to compare the two companies and the two platforms sometimes, because, I know it's kind of a meme almost at this point, but they really do have different goals. Microsoft just wants money from people, and they're trying to do it by looking like the good guy. And they have, in a word, been quote unquote the good guy for a while now. But they're trying to do it, not by selling consoles, because, just now people need to realize that you'll be able to play all the Xbox games on a phone, an Android phone, on the old Xbox, on a new Xbox, on your PC, wherever you want to play for the most part. And what I think people also need to realize is I can almost guarantee for the Xbox Ones, at some point there's going to be an xCloud app for the current gen, and you may be able to play the new games via streaming through your current console. I've thought that for a while, that I actually didn't think the Xbox Series S was even going to exist, because what they were going to do is say, hey, you want to buy an old Xbox, or you have an old Xbox, load up xCloud, you'll get that experience. It's going to have the latency of streaming, but if you hate that enough, or if you really like the service enough, well, here's the Series X you can upgrade to and play these games directly on your own system and not have to depend on the cloud. I still think that that's a possibility. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that eventually happens. But then there comes some point where, what if they're able to throw xCloud onto like Roku's, or, onto some of these like streaming devices that don't really need much horsepower. They just need to be able to run the app, because everything's being handled by the cloud. I think it's going to be an interesting few years, because I think xCloud is only in its beginning. And I think there's a lot more coming than what we could even consider right now. I also don't think that hardware is going anywhere, but as for getting back to my original topic with Halo and stuff, I think it's a pretty awful PR situation. I think it was a good chance for Xbox to jump ahead a little bit, by having this like unique experience, likely to come out way before anything was going to come out on PlayStation that's like super significant. I don't think it can be ignored still, though, that like PlayStation doesn't have a Halo. PlayStation's biggest games are God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn and The Last of Us and Spider-Man. And those are all obviously and impeccable games, some of the best games made. But there's a theme. These are all single player, single for most people experiences, 15 to 25 hours, third person adventure games. And that can't be ignored because that's a very popular genre. But what a game like Halo brings that none of the PlayStation exclusives have is hopefully a really good story. And in the past, a good story, if we ignore a couple of the more recent entries, is a really good single player story mode that you can play co-op, is a really probably still one of the best multiplayer modes. And then on top of that, if they still bring back this creator deal where you can make your own game modes and do stuff like that, which it sounds like they are, there's no, I don't even think you can combine multiple Sony exclusives right now to make everything that a game like Halo brings. That's why when people, even to this day, will make fun of games, I can't think of it now, the pirate game on Xbox. A game like that, it started off really bad, and I think we all acknowledge that. But that experience that you get from that game, especially now when it seems like it's a very popular game at this point, there's no experience like that you can get on Sony. So Sony's not hurting, and I'm sure they've got some stuff in the pipe to try to compete with this. But it is odd to me that, with all this time, like, they found their cash cow and they're going to milk it until it's dry, and they should. But I am curious too, if at some point in this generation we'll see them try to move on, because even like their new exclusive game Godfall is another third person adventure. Like it still kind of follows that similar, very vague model. Now they're kind of trying to do like a Warframe Destiny thing with that. I think that game's going to be a disaster, to be totally honest, but I'll be happy to be wrong. And, and this is kind of dribbled into the second topic I have is, what's the state of the quote unquote console war? Honestly, I think we're just in a situation now where there's just a bunch of really good games to play. And there's going to be a bunch more of them in the next, 2 or 3 years. And I think that, kind of on the previous conversation about how Microsoft just wants you to play their stuff no matter where you play it, I am really curious about how Sony's going to handle PC adaptations. So, we just had Horizon Zero Dawn release, even though that game originally came out in 2017, I believe. It shouldn't take 3 years for there to be a PC port. But Sony, I think, sees PC as a competitor and not a place to get more revenue. Because if they release their games on PC, there's, less incentive for people to buy on, their consoles and to buy their consoles. And that difference in philosophy kind of makes sense because Microsoft, if people play Game Pass on their PCs, guess what product they're still using? They're still using Windows, and they're still, they're still utilizing the Microsoft platform, even if they buy games on PC. Where with Sony, they're actually having to give people using their competitor's platform access to their own proprietary stuff. So, I get it, I understand, but man, I really hope that Horizon Zero Dawn is crazy successful on PC. And I know Death Stranding is coming at some point as well. I don't really intend to play those games, but I feel like I got the gist of those games from watching playthroughs and summaries and so on. But I think it's a good step that they're starting to put their stuff over there. Now, are we ever going to see The Last of Us 2 on PC, God of War on PC? I would be immensely surprised. I think those are still system sellers for them, and they know that. And I am super interested to see what kind of next gen editions of those games we're going to see, because we haven't even heard of a like God of War 2 quite yet, even though I have no doubt it's coming. So we'll see. And then that kind of bleeds into the third topic of, why should people even buy a Series X without Halo? I kind of covered that before, where, like, I know for me, one of the main reasons I want a Series X at this point is because, like, I still play a lot of Division 2. And even though I've gotten a little frustrated with that game, I'm sure I'll keep playing more of it. And the reason I'm excited for that is because I could play Division 2 on my PC, which is a lot more powerful than my One X. I just don't like it. I don't like it on PC. One, I don't like using mouse and keyboard with third-person games. I think they control way better on controllers. But then I don't want to use a controller on my PC because that feels like blasphemy, and it just isn't. It doesn't seem right. And beyond that, I just like the simplicity of the console and things like that. So for me, I'm excited to play a game like Division 2 on these new consoles, simply because I want to experience it the way it was probably developed to be played, at higher frames and smoother loading. If you aren't familiar with Division 2, it's had issues where, I mean, that game has pushed the current gen consoles, even the PS4 Pro and the Series, the Xbox One X, to their limits, mostly because of their 5400 RPM hard drives. Now, I know with the PlayStation you can sub in an SSD, but I would have to imagine that 98% of people have never done that. And what's interesting about Division 2 is that they ran into an issue where people were literally hitting walls in the open world. And this like immensely detailed one-to-one creation of Washington, D.C. They were running into walls simply literally because the hard drives couldn't load the world fast enough. So there was data streaming issues, and people were running into walls literally, that invisible walls. And that was pretty much 100% because all of these people are using these 5400 RPM hard drives instead of solid state drives, because people on PC aren't having that issue. It's not an issue on PC, because even I have a 7200 RPM hard drive that I imagine wouldn't have those issues. But then you move to a SSD, and especially an NVMe SSD, and you're talking about like insane streaming speeds when it comes to data. And I've said it multiple times on my stream, but I still don't think people realize if a console player has never played on like a PC, especially like a more modern PC with the newer processors, newer GPUs, and especially the NVMe drives, like, I can't wait to see people's reactions to that first time they hit a button to load up a level and it just pops up. Because it's crazy. Like, for me, the big difference was I've actually now installed SSDs in both of our laptops and my desktop, because like I remember, for most of my life, you would turn on your PC and then have a 3, 4, 5 minute startup process for Windows, where now you hit the power button and you're in your desktop in 15 seconds. I mean, it's just bonkers, man. It's so awesome. So more than anything, I'm actually really excited for people to see that. We'll wrap this thing up with some content updates. I am probably going to do the EchoCast this coming week. There should be there's going to be a bunch of Division 2 updates coming out, I suspect, in the next week or two. So I may do a couple shows of the EchoCast before I do another Xbox Dadcast. But I also will either do a special episode or dedicate a whole week to Gamescom for Xbox, assuming they have some significant announcements. I still don't know what that looks like, but I'm hoping that they are able to throw out some cool stuff to take the sting out of the Halo delay. Other than that, I did not stream this weekend. It was my my child's birthday. It's her first birthday, so we had a party and we just were very busy. And I was actually surprised I even had time to record this podcast. So sorry about no streams if you're listening to this and you watched my stream as well. But we'll get back to it this week and this coming weekend. And that's about it. So please take a moment to rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. If you want to support the podcast, please check out patreon.com/Bondiesel. I'm Bondiesel on Twitch, where I try to stream a couple times a week. I'm also Bondiesel on Twitter @Bondiesel, or if you don't want my super interesting personal insights, you can also check out @Xbox Dadcast. Until the next time we meet, be good and game on.